We also have a look at those grain markets this week with Elaine Kub. For the time being, U.S. farmers remain behind their 5-year average in planting progress. The nation's growers have put in 19% of their corn, 6 points off the average, and 2% of their soybeans, 4 points behind the norm. We talked with Elaine Thursday morning and started by asking about planting progress across the country.
Yeah, it's behind pace, but I don't think it's behind pace enough that the market is worried about it. Obviously, we're not seeing a lot of bullish concern in the corn market yet, and we're not even seeing a very strong idea that acres might be switched from corn to soybeans. That was one theory put forth because of the rain in the southeast and the relatively slow pace in the southeast. But I don't think it's slow enough yet or late enough yet for anybody to really be worried about this. Your central area there in Iowa and Illinois, they have a very regular pace, about 6 or 7% per week. And I think it will be a very big week this week. So when we come back on Monday, we'll see some bigger numbers.
Let's start in the corn market. Can you explain how low corn prices currently are and, more importantly, why?
Well, even a week or two ago, they were, $3.80, so it felt like we were within 20 cents of a $4 price, a $4 at the beginning of the price, and they've really sunk through here in the past week, and it was somewhat of a mystery, and I took a look at the very large volume days when the corn was selling the worst late last week, and actually the total open interest was falling during those days, so it seems more like liquidation, that someone was selling off long positions rather than short selling the market, which is good. I mean, it suggests that there's not actually someone in there making a play, perhaps based on the avian influenza factor, that maybe there would be less corn fed to that segment of the market. But I don't think that's part of it. I think perhaps, it just sunk and it just extended its lower price, this range that it's been trading in 2015. And once it hit new lows, it spooked some people out of the market.
Does that mean then that you have a reason to believe that this will go higher?
Yeah, I think on balance, I have a bullish tilt to this market because there's not really very many legitimately bearish arguments against it, other than the strong U.S. dollar, which has been a factor for the past month or so. I believe that's already been priced in. Overall, you've got the consideration that ethanol has been strong. The inventories have actually been coming down, this week's report showed. Livestock feeders and commercial buyers have actually been buying up corn at this price because this is a cheap price. This is as cheap as it's been in 2015, and they can lock in some prices throughout the year here. But most of all, I think the new crop market is where we might see some legitimately fundamental bullishness based on planting concerns that it is dry in the western corn belt.
Soybeans, meanwhile, had a big day on Wednesday, a double-digit gainer. They're up as we talked Thursday morning. What's moving this market right now?
Everything that has been bullish about soybeans for the past 6 months or a year is still very bullish for soybeans. So this week's export report finally showed, as we knew it eventually would, that the total U.S. pace of export sales has finally officially exceeded the USDA's 2015 projection. So as we come into May, into the supply and demand reports, they are going to have to adjust the export projection for soybeans. And it's actually being led by soybean meal. It's over $320 a ton, which is a really good sign. Like I mentioned, the avian influenza, I think you worry about the feed sector of the market being pressured by that, but since soybean meal has remained so strong, the margins for crushing soybeans remain very strong. Soybeans are actually, everything bullish about them is still in place.
You looked at the drought monitor that came out on Thursday morning, and you see that Iowa's in good shape, Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, eastern Nebraska is in good shape. Why is this such an important deal that parts of South Dakota and Minnesota are not doing so well?
Yeah, I think they're very frequently just sort of discounted by the market, but they shouldn't be. Southern Minnesota is actually the #5 corn producer in the nation. And I took a look at which areas of the United States their yield is actually finally correlated to the U.S. average yield for a DTN column, and it turns out that northwestern Iowa and southeastern South Dakota is actually the most correlated spot to final U.S. corn yield. So if it gets dry in South Dakota and southern Minnesota, it is important to the market. And, people I think also discount, in the east, they discount Nebraska because they think that Nebraska is irrigated. And much of Nebraska is irrigated, but not all of Nebraska. So this drought segment, and particularly, in eastern South Dakota, is perhaps more important than the market realizes.
Finally, we're waiting on the Fed's decision about whether or not it's going to raise interest rates. How is that playing in for corn and soybeans?
Yeah, it was actually very clear. This was the one very clear story in the market that actually seemed to make sense this week. The Fed decided, or we saw results that the GDP is not rising as much as many people expected. I think they were surprised by that. So that is pressuring the stock market lower. But the most important part for the grains is that when we believe that the Fed will not be raising interest rates in June, that they probably won't raise interest rates until September at the earliest, now that that is the belief, the US dollar sank quite quickly here on Wednesday and into Thursday, and probably will continue here into the end of the week. A lower dollar will support the grains. The dollar is strong for historical terms or for 2015 terms, but it's taking some pressure off of the grains, and I believe that is what's helping them rise or bounce back up here a little bit at the end of the week.
We mentioned drought conditions to the north and east. The latest U.S. drought monitor showed 28% of Nebraska in moderate drought, an increase of 6% from last week.